Welcome to the Shatterpoint. I'm your host, Forrest Windu. Today I'll be talking about the 5 stages of grief, focusing on the first stage, denial. The action of declaring something untrue or the refusal of something requested or desired. Denial can take many forms, and as you'll see, this is one of the biggest issues that we have facing the manosphere now, I think. And the reason I say so is because the red pill requires us to deal with things as they are, to accept things as they are, the truth as we understand it and comprehend it. And it happens on levels and at different stages. But denial is insidious in a sense because there are things that we overlook in our own lives, and unless you're an introspective person, you will definitely overlook these things. And with that overlooking, you'll miss some key components that may be the very thing that you need to set yourself free. I will begin with relationships. One of the things that we deny ourselves about, or we are in denial about, is the way our relationships are and have been formed, beginning with the family of origin. Sometimes we're in denial about the level of dysfunction that we experienced, or the level of disengagement that we faced in our family of origin issues. Sometimes it's based on the impoverished, having coming up in poverty or in homes that lack financial ability, lack of finance. Sometimes it's education, not necessarily formal education, but just, for men in particular, game is a big thing. How to find, select, vet, and then to secure a future partner. Sometimes our denial centers around absent parents, and which is in this space in particular. I know that I know my father, so I don't have the issue that a lot of people do have. I missed some formative years with him, but we've developed a relationship over the years that has been paramount to my development, growth, and to my understanding of life in general. Often the absentee parent, usually the father in our communities, is a symptom and not necessarily a disease. Unfortunately, it's not often told that way. And in the manosphere here in this space, with myself and other content creators, we can give you a complete list of all the different things and reasons why men may tend to walk away even from their own families, or in many cases, which we don't know until later, have been kept away from their families or warned away from their families, and perhaps even those relationships have been sabotaged. Sometimes abusive parents in the home. Sometimes we're not even aware of what abuse looks like, whether it be verbal abuse. And I know many black men who deal with verbal abuse from their parents, from their grandparents, or, particularly from their mothers. And I've said it before, the first person to ever call me nigger was my mother. And, in the black community, we use that word tongue-in-cheek, but the reality is there's a certain significance and danger to it, particularly when we use it in the framework of anger. We use it in the framework of how dare you, and we have to be very mindful of that. And a lot of times the women that look like us, even the ones who birth us, sometimes are a little bit careless with those words. Comparisons, misandry, a word made popular, more popular, and given proper context and actual meaning in this space by Dr. T. Hassan Johnson and the Onyx Report. I recommend you check his channel out if you want to comprehend black male misandry and what that means and what it looks like for us. A lot of times, because of that misandric viewpoint of our gynocratic communities and families, the father may even have a stunted or skewed view of himself. You may have heard this: "Don't be like me." And sometimes that just comes from his inability or seeming inability to be able to please or do things necessary and important for his family, for his mother, his sisters, and then of course later his girlfriends or wife, and then his children. And sometimes that is compounded by the narrative that your mother may have given you. She couldn't stand him because she couldn't have her way with him. Now, this is not all, of course, and I'm not going to preface any of my statements by saying not all, because that's elementary to me, and if you're here, hopefully you'll be able to read between the lines and comprehend that I'm not talking about all people, all black women, all black men, all families, all mothers. The problem is I could be talking about yours. And this is something that we have been in denial of for far too long, to our detriment. If mom couldn't stand your father, she probably don't like you much either. Sorry. You have to question the reason why she even had children with a man she couldn't stand. I don't know that many of us have. Sometimes it's sibling rivalry, being compared to another child, a boy or girl child, or your parents showing favoritism towards that child, or neglecting you, or being abusive and burdensome to you as a child, or exasperating you to the point of despair. Those are forms of neglect, abuse, and in our particular case, misandry. Another thing that we may overlook or not be in denial of are social interactions, such as the neighborhoods that we grew up in, our friends or the lack thereof. Growing up sometimes impoverished or in some of the communities that we grow up in, why did we end up there? It's almost a foregone conclusion that we're not allowed to even question why. And the answer is usually, and for a lot of our families, is because your dad is not here. But dad doesn't live like that. Not to mention the fact that the truth is, it would seem, statistically speaking, since more than 40% of black men don't even have children, that all the women seem to be having children by the same guy. I don't know. It's for you to decide. But with regard to your friends and your household, your neighborhood, where you grew up, what it looks like, when I was coming up, there was a time, it wasn't too late, where people would actually go out and sweep the street, sweep their sidewalk, scrub their steps down. I haven't seen that in a very long time. As a matter of fact, the last time I saw it, I was the one doing it. The schools that we go to and attend, usually a public school, because it's ordinarily what we can afford, unless we get a scholarship to another type of school, some type of private school or parochial school, which tend to be able to harness and give children much more individual attention, have better technology, and better regulation of social interactions, as a general rule. How we make friends at that school, who we choose as friends, or how we may not have been able to make friends because we're too different. Maybe because we don't speak the same way that the other kids do, or because we don't have the clothes and dress the way that the other kids do as well. Those are all things that we may have been in denial about with regard to the things that cause us pain emotionally. And the reason, again, I'm going through this series because I find it pivotal. I think it's something that the Black Manosphere has been wrestling with. It's a focal point that needs to be brought to the surface, because we use a lot of language in this space to get to the bottom line, and the bottom line is we're hurt. It hurts to be rejected by your family of origin. It hurts to be rejected by your peers and your friends, even if you have a lot of them, even on a greater societal level with racism/white supremacy, misandry and shaming. There's a lot of things, a lot of language out here, and a lot of concepts and a lot of media and propaganda put forth to cause you, intentionally to cause you to think less of yourself, and intentionally to make you feel as though you don't have a place of value in this society. And those things are gross abuse of us by the society at large. Another part of the social interactions that we may be in denial about is dating and mate selection. You know, if many of our young men and women, but many of our young men are raised in single-parent family, women-led homes, there's a lot of information missing. Unfortunately, it's biased, and I would almost make that akin to abuse, because if you're only giving a person part of what they need to comprehend in order to solve a problem that's coming up, you're not giving them enough information to make a good decision. And those decisions have dire consequences as it relates to dating and family structure. Moving on to that, another thing that we tend to be in denial about is our home life. Whether it be the intimate partner roles and expectations that we move into dating with, what we think that the role of the male and females are, how we think they're supposed to be executed, who has responsibility for what, has all been blurred by the society at large, intentionally. That's my estimation. I believe it's fully intentional. It furthers an agenda of those, whoever they are, to undermine the differences in role assignments of the genders, and to obfuscate those roles tends to make it almost impossible to live up to. You're given bad information. You're encouraged to believe the sugar and spice and everything nice, and that women are above reproach and are more naturally loving and nurturing. And that is not necessarily true, as we see through intimate partner violence, through the family court system, as we see through just the way the children, particularly boy children, are raised and not invested in to the same degree or even close to the girls. Raising children is another thing we're in denial of. And this is something in particular, I was going to do a video on this, but I think I'll just speak on it here. I think, with regard to raising fathers, raising children, and being in denial, I think one of the things that we have to be very careful of is that we're not spoiling our girls to the point that they are not accountable. And of course, I don't mean being harder on them than you would your boys. I just mean that the standards of excellence, the standards of whether it be chastity, whether it be accountability, whether it be performance, all of those standards need to be held true across the line. And I'm not saying that they all get this, every child gets the same thing, because that's not necessarily fair. Fairness is giving people what they need, not giving everyone the same thing. But I think that there are a bunch of simp daddies out there that just say, look to keep their little girls safe from harm and don't bruise her knee, and nobody talks to my baby like that, and don't worry, baby, daddy's got you. It gets to a point where I hope that this strikes you. It offers you a compelling insight so that you can reconsider maybe the way that you negotiate your relationship with your children, particularly your girl children. Not to mention the fact that society is going to give them a different message than you do. There are some causes for this. Many times, particularly for men who have blended families or are estranged from their family where their children are, there's an attempt to strengthen that relationship, but there's only so much time and so much influence you can have while not living day to day with that child, male or female. So it is incumbent upon us as men to navigate that in a way that is more equitable and more beneficial to a loving and cooperative family dynamic. It's just something that we tend to be in denial about. Another thing we tend to be in denial about is whether complementary or combative roles in marriage or in intimate partner relationships. So many times in our culture, particularly today, the gender roles are so blurred and obscured that women feel that being a man is preferable, or operating in the mindset of maleness is preferable to being a woman, not truly embracing her femininity. And then men on the other side being so compliant, so compassionate, and such simps that they're not operating in the fullness of their masculinity either, which are all family of origin issues particularly, and then of course symptoms of the mass society in general. With regard to the family, another thing we may be in denial of is the reality of group economics. Is the person that you're interested in being married to and staying with, are they willing to practice group economics with you? Is it, what's yours is mine and what's mine is still mine? Well, that doesn't seem reasonable, equitable, or fair. Will they back you the way that you back them? Will they support you the way you support them? And please understand, I understand that there's a disparity between what black men earn and black women earn, but we could honestly argue that is more that's more based on the types of jobs chosen, the longevity, the ability to stay at a job longer and without breaks for maternity leave or doctor's visits and things like that. I mean, that all the gender wealth income gap has been debunked many times. I don't have to go into it here. But are they willing to support you the way you support them? If your wife or your girlfriend has an idea or something that she wants to build or have or do, you'd probably be the first person in line to step up and show support and give to that cause. Invest your resources into that. Will she do the same with you? Is that equitable? Maybe we might be in denial a little bit about the reality of that, and it's something worth looking into. Another thing I would recommend that we consider that we might be in denial about is living the truth and not societal narratives. I touched on it a little bit throughout this message, and I just really wanted to say that sometimes the societal narratives are poisonous. They just are. They're not conducive to happiness. They're not conducive to joy. They're not conducive to productivity, effectiveness. They're not conducive to people getting along and working with one another, particularly our people. And the key is for us not to drink the Kool-Aid or fall for the banana in a tailpipe, particularly in this space. And I love this space because this is the place where we get to hash out these narratives, to debunk what needs debunking and to forward what needs to be forwarded. It's incumbent upon us as men to know what we are doing, because throughout the history, our history in this country as black men in particular, the vast majority of us have had a desire for our families and for our communities. It has not been a gender-first concept as has been practiced by the women who look like us. And if that's the case, then perhaps we can stop being in denial about some of the things that we're blindsided by, or not even blind, we're denying it. We're acting as if it doesn't exist and excusing it. And I can understand why we'd excuse it, because who wants to think of their mom as not a good person? Who wants to think of their mother as abusive? Who wants to think of their mother as the person who crushed their alpha energy? Who wants to think of their mother as the person who effeminized them and made them think more in a gynocratic way, rather, and a simp and a maggle and a male hyena, rather than thinking in the fullness of their masculinity as a man? No one. No one wants to think that they're a major contributor to the gynocracy by not training their daughters how to be feminine, how to be a complement to a man, how to work with a man and conflict resolve with a man, how to present herself and not come with masculine energy so that she's not standing in a male space expecting a female treatment. Well, that is for you to decide. But I know that this space is in need of these types of conversations to continue to move forward. I'm impressed and I'm thankful for the scholars that are in this space. Shout out to Dr. Tia San Johnson, the Green Gorilla, Dr. Tommy Curry. Shout out to BGS Sidmore. Shout out to the Crimson Cure. Shout out to the Masculine Mercenaries. And shout out to the Pimp God too. Oh, and Dr. BOA. Well, I'll be back with the next installment of the 5 Stages of Grief. And we'll keep this thing moving. Until then, may the force be with you.